Hey guys, it's Han, and today I have my Tamiya Terra Scorcher. This is a re-release buggy that Tamiya re-released in 2020, so it hasn't been around for very long, but it does seem like the availability of this kit is kind of spotty. I know A-Main Hobbies stocks some, Tower Hobbies doesn't seem to stock it, but you can get this chassis, this buggy chassis, under a lot of different names. I think like Fire Dragon and Thunder Dragon and stuff like that. The Dragon series buggies, a lot of them are basically the same buggy, with the main difference with some of them being having monoshock in the front instead of uh, the dual shocks. Other than that, from what I can tell, they do seem like the same buggy. And also from what I can tell, these Terra Scorcher does seem like it's the kind of the top of the line version of this platform. And this really wasn't a buggy that was on my radar. And if you kind of want to see my first impressions and kind of initial thoughts about this buggy, I do have an unboxing video on my channel that you can check out. So I will link that at the end of this video. But for now, you can see I have my Terra Scorcher built and painted in one of those rare instances where I kind of did the box art paint scheme. The box art paint scheme is, of course, this blue paint scheme, but I kind of went and did what a lot of people do, and instead of just doing the plain blue, went with the Tamiya metallic blue, which I think looks much nicer. And I wanted to kind of do an overview of this buggy and this chassis, how the build kind of went, and just my kind of my thoughts, and then a short little drive of it. Because I don't think I drive my cars enough for you guys these days, so I will actually drive this. And it's it's going to be kind of my first impressions of how this thing drives, because since this thing has been built, I actually haven't driven it yet. I've only tested that it works, but I haven't actually driven it, so I'm pretty excited to see how this thing is going to handle. So, initial thoughts of the completed buggy. It's a very very nice looking buggy. I'm really usually not a fan of this cab forward style of buggy. But for some reason, with the kind of spoiler that this has and the overall shape of it, I think it kind of works. It looks fairly nice, and the color scheme is very appealing to me, and I'm really liking the overall presentation of this buggy. So, it does have the little driver figure inside. I haven't painted the head, but I will get around to that eventually. But the buggy being a blue and white mostly paint scheme, even though the driver's head isn't painted, it doesn't really get in the way or like clash with the rest of the buggy too much. So who knows if I'll actually end up like getting around to painting that helmet, but we'll see. I have placed most of the decals where they tell you to in the instructions. I have veered away a little bit with some of the stickers here. This sticker right here is supposed to be for the helmet, but I placed it on the windshield. This Tamiya sticker right here and on the spoiler are not regularly supposed to be there. Neither are these Tamiya stickers on the side, but I thought they looked pretty nice and it was included in the sticker sheet, so I decided to find a place for them. And overall, most of the stickers are pretty easy to place, and there are not a lot of decals. And this is a pretty easy paint job to do since it is just a single color. But one thing to note is they do not include any window masks like they usually do. So if you do want your windows to be clear, you will have to manually mask them, which I think is a little bit more of an advanced thing to do compared to a lot of Tamiya buggies. So I wouldn't say this is a hard buggy to build, but it's definitely not a beginner entry-level buggy. So I did have to mask off the windows, and I did a decent job of it. It's not perfect, but it's a nice 10-footer, and it looks decent, and it will look decent when it's moving around. And like I mentioned, because this is a re-release buggy, when it was originally released, it did use a mechanical speed control with that huge heatsink on the back, which would have stuck out right here. This would have been a hole, I believe. But on this re-release kit, the instructions actually tell you to mask off this part and paint it with silver to kind of mimic the look of the mechanical speed control heatsink, which I think is a pretty cool look. And it even still includes a little sticker telling you to not touch the heatsink because, of course, that heatsink will get very hot. So overall, very, very nice looking buggy. I've really fallen in love with the look of this thing, and I think just the overall presentation is fantastic. I even like the yellow shocks on it, the little splash of yellow, and even the suspension arms being blue, I think goes really well with the rest of the paint scheme, so that's pretty cool. So some of the pretty cool things about this chassis is it is a four-wheel drive buggy, and it's also kind of mid-motor, like mid-rear motor, which is pretty cool for handling, and it also includes sway bars both front and rear, which is not something you see usually on a lot of Tamiya buggies or even just buggies in general, unless they're like high-end race buggies or something like that. So that's very, very cool and neat that it does include sway bars. So I'm hoping that will add to the performance of this thing. The body, the way it mounts is pretty interesting. It only uses one body mount. So you take the one body mount out, and the rear is actually attached with Velcro. So you'll just lift up the front of the body like this and just kind of pull it out. And it has this nice little dust cover here. It does come clear, and the instructions actually tell you to just paint the driver portion, but I've went ahead and just painted the entire thing because I didn't really want to bother with that. And this is also pretty interesting because it also mounts with just one screw, and there's a piece of Lexan that kind of fits in here, and you just kind of pull it up to access the insides. So if you kind of pull it up, it's kind of awkward to do, and I'm not a big fan of how this works, but it's serviceable, I suppose. But you can see it is included with the TBLE 04S speed control that they're including nowadays. I do have just like a FlySky receiver in here, some basic servo. I might have to upgrade the servo later, which might be more of a pain because you can kind of see the servo is really kind of buried in the chassis. So I am going to have to take off this entire front bulkhead to access the servo, which is going to be a little bit annoying, but it is what it is. And you can see the center drive shaft is right here. And it's pretty interesting. It's a really, really thin drive shaft. And it's honestly kind of like the Allen wrench or sway bar material. So you can see it's really, really flexible. And it's kind of a weird and flimsy design for a drive shaft. So I'm not quite sure how well that drive shaft's going to work. I suspect there's going to be a lot of flex in it, which is going to result in pretty interesting like throttle and response characteristics, so pretty interested to see how that's going to work out. I will have to see online if anyone has come up with any like upgrade drive shaft solutions for that, because I'm really not a fan of the center drive shaft design for this buggy, but we'll see. The battery also mounts in the middle here to kind of further balance out the weight of the buggy. The battery is mounted just with this kind of, again, friction fit battery cover that kind of just swings like that. So we'll have to see how well that actually holds the battery. And of course, you're only going to be able to fit rounded packs or just nickel metal hydride packs 6L, just because of the shape of the battery tray. But other than that, it's a pretty cool looking chassis. The suspension is set up pretty nicely out of the box. So that's very nice. The bumper is nice and durable and very, very large and very flexible. So I'm hoping this is going to be a pretty durable bumper. And I don't think it looks too bad. It has a nice kind of skid plate design, so that should be pretty cool. One thing to note about the wheels and tires, to me it kind of seems like it uses the Avante style hubs. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to use kind of the triple hole Avante style hubs. So the wheels are unfortunately proprietary, and I'm not sure if you can fully just swap it on for hexes. So that's something I'll have to kind of tinker with and figure out. But speaking of the Avante, it does kind of have slightly kind of an Avante look to the buggy, which I think is pretty cool. Kind of like a budget version of an Avante, maybe. What else is there to talk about? It does have diffs front and rear, pretty simple. I'm pretty excited to see how these tires will work. They're only air-filled, there's no foams in them, and they are spikes, so I don't know how well they'll work on the street, but hopefully they'll work pretty well on like carpet or on grass. But that's enough of me talking about it. Let's actually go outside and take it for a quick spin. So we're outside, and let's see how this thing runs. So we had a nice little run with the Terra Scorcher, and I have to say I absolutely loved how this thing handled and drove. Just a couple notes. One thing I forgot to mention while I was talking about the buggy was the front bulkhead part here is a very infamously weak part, and it doesn't even take a crash to split it or break it. A lot of people actually break it while they're building the kit, so I didn't even bother using the stock bulkhead. I actually have an aluminum part on here to replace that, and of course that adds a little weight to the front, and that might have changed the handling characteristics a little bit, but I don't think it's drastic enough to really note in detail. But yeah, the sway bars definitely work. The buggy corners very flat. The only downside about this buggy is the wheels and tires. You can see they're already quite fairly worn. Because they're pin spikes and I was running them mostly on road, they do wear out fairly quickly. But from what I've heard, other people say these don't really work very well on dirt anyway. So I don't know. Tires might be something I might have to look into for this buggy. But other than the tires, the way the suspension worked, the way the buggy handled, the weight balance of it, I absolutely loved everything about it. You saw in the running video that it was running on pretty rough surface, but the suspension was able to soak up a lot of it. It is still granted a low slung buggy, so it's still gonna be bouncing around a little bit, but it was relatively smooth for what kind of vehicle it is, and I was actually very pleasantly surprised with the overall performance of this. So I think if you're kind of looking for a cool little buggy, or kind of, it reminds me kind of the Tamiya Avante. So I kind of think of this buggy as like a baby Avante. So if you are someone that really likes the look of the Avante but can't afford or can't find the Avante, I think you might get your fix for a little bit with this buggy. I think it looks great. It performs great. I'm still not quite sure about how durable it's going to be, but I still think it was a very enjoyable build and a very enjoyable buggy. So that's my little look at the Terra Scorcher. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you guys next time.